Hey everybody, it's the Mega Matt Cat back again. Sorry about the delays. Kind of got hung up with work and life and all that junk. You know how it is. But today I'm back with another review. It's Far Cry 4, or as you can see, I Kill the World. So let's get started. And of course, how do you start this? Well, with explosions and gunfire, I think. I mean, it is Far Cry after all. So let's begin. So basically, Far Cry 4, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a first-person shooter with an open-world style and theme that is essentially a first-person shooter with very few limitations. It's got a beautiful, big open world, lots of stuff to do, different gameplay styles. You can stealth it, you can shoot it, you can charge in and just go crazy. You can do all kinds of weird stuff. You can get killed by bees. In many ways, this is a game that has a lot of stuff, but we're going to talk about the usual: story, gameplay, technical, and my conclusions. Now, in that regard, we of course are going to be starting with the story. Now, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but I will give you the basics. You play as AJ Guile, an American citizen who was born in the land of Karat, where the game takes place, who's coming home to bury his mother, well, to scatter her ashes at a location. However, within a few minutes of arriving, you're caught by the local tyrant, escape his palace, and join up with the local freedom fighters to overthrow his tyranny. As I said, coming home to war. And that's really all there is to it. I'm not going to go into the story any more than that. So, I will give you a few bits of information about who you'll meet, but nothing too major beyond the general stuff. Now, those of you who are familiar with Far Cry 3 are going to ask, and rightly so, what does this game have in comparison to the legendary Voss from Far Cry 3? And what we have is Pagan Min, a sociopath, psychopath, lunatic. I can't really describe how screwed up this dude is. But he is the primary antagonist, although he's somewhat of an absent antagonist, because you don't really run into him more than once or twice in the game. I mean, a few times, but he's not like Voss, who seemed to be an omnipresent threat the way it was in the third game. And even then, when Voss got killed, you know, the guy that replaced him with came off as way less threatening. Now, you also deal with some of Pagan Min's lieutenants and his personal guard and his soldiers and all that, which, fair is fair. They are, you know, the main enemies. But in this world, well, let's just say that everything's your enemy. The story is good, but it is sort of... it's just there. It's a good story, but it's not what you're here for with Far Cry. You're here to get in, get crazy, and have lots of fun. Do what you want, kill who you want, you know, fly where you want, climb where you want. And really, where this game's strongest points will be in its gameplay. That being said, the voice acting for the characters, the writing, all of it is very solid. Particularly, the writing for Min is dark and humorous in a lot of ways. And you will get a good deal of entertainment from him. But at the same time, it's just there because the game needs a story. And I do feel that the story in number 3 came off a lot better, if only because it had a much better structure. If there's one thing about this game that didn't really feel right, was that in the third game, you starting out with no talent or skill seems logical and reasonable. You're a kid from the city. You're not some soldier. This game, you're not like that. You have some skill, some experience, yet you start out with nothing, just like normal. And I understand that progression is part of it, but if we're going to do that, the story needs to reflect it. Just my personal opinion, though. That being said, the game story is good and well worth the entertainment value, but I still feel as if there was better stories that could have been written for it. Now, moving on, let's talk the gameplay. As I've said before, anything else in a game is secondary. Gameplay is what matters. And in this game, well, as I like to say, you're getting away with murder. You're also Peter's worst nightmare, too. Got Honey Badger, run, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. Yes. Just like in the last game, everything in the world is trying to murder you. And new to the group is the Honey Badger. Don't get fooled by their cute, cuddly appearance. These things are rabid, monstrous little monster freaks, and I've seen them kill an entire outpost by themselves. On top of that, you've got your usual tigers, bears, leopards. You got rhinos now, which is ugh. Nothing like trying to put 8 clips into a rhino to kill it. But to the point, Far Cry 4's gameplay is all about exploration and combat and open world awesomeness. There's nowhere you can't go, there's nothing you can't do. From the forests of the mountainsides to the snowy peaks of the Himalayas. You want to go wingsuiting? It can be done. You want to fly a gyrocopter? It can be done. You want to swim through lakes? You can do it. I'd watch out for the fish, though. They tend to be a little bitey. But this game is all about going where you want, doing what you want, and surviving. I will say that this game feels both more difficult and more simplistic. And I'll try to explain that, but basically in Far Cry 3, once you got the right combination for your playstyle, there was nothing that could stop you for all intents and purposes. But in this game, because of the greater variety of enemies and the much more difficult terrain, plus the far greater frequency of animal attacks, you'll find yourself in a much more desperate struggle to survive. Granted, there are still some things you can do to give yourself an edge. A good example of this is, for example, combining the bow, a good light machine gun, a silenced pistol, and the flamethrower will make you an outpost eliminating monster. And it allows you to play both stealth and heavy attack and not have to switch back and forth between the two playstyles by changing out your equipment. You've already got the equipment to do both. The game adds a few new weapons as well as some new signature weapons that allow you to customize weapons or have pre-customized specialty weapons that can give you a decided edge. It also has some very interesting characters that give you very interesting missions. Such as the 2 leaders of the Golden Path, the rebel group you work for. But I would recommend that if you're going to play this, the moment you get a chance to meet Longinus, go meet him. He's a trip. There's also some literal trips, but we'll get to that later. Moving on to the technical aspect. In love with the carnage, baby. What is great about this game is, as far as its technical abilities, is its visual punch. The game is a powerful, beautiful vision. It has detailed and in-depth environments. Everything from the watery graves of ships to the high peaks of mountains and the lush forests. You can climb and clamber over a lot of it, yet the game never seems to have any real technical bugs or glitches that I detected, minus a few clipping issues with dead bodies. After all, when they're hanging off the side of a building and you try to search them, you kind of clip through them and the building. But the game's strength is in its lack of loading time almost. You can more or less go from place to place to place without any difficulty. And the line of draw, especially on the higher ends like the PlayStation 4 or a good PC, are fantastic. I'm using the PlayStation 4 version, and it is notably impressive. Now, fair's fair. The PlayStation 4 is not without its limitations, particularly when it came to its network. But as the solo gamer, I was less concerned with that. I found a lot of entertainment, and the visuals were a treat. Also interesting is the game's sound design. Unlike some of the weapons and items in Far Cry 4, I feel the weapon sounds in this game is much better. It sounds very, very powerful. Certain weapons sound authentic. Others sound, explosive and deafening. Good examples, explosive weapons like the grenades or rocket launchers. They don't have the sort of flighty sound that they had before. These have a real pump, a real hammer to them. I do think that there's some musical problems. I feel like the game doesn't have the music selection and depth that it should. Especially, I feel the fact that you can't be listening to like the radio when you're on foot is a big detractor, because the radio station is hilarious and has a good variety of tracks, but you can only hear it in vehicles, which is, again, it's another problem that's held over from Far Cry 3. And I think that that's a shame. Still, the voice acting in the game is top-notch. Its graphical fidelity is fantastic, especially on the newer consoles or if you've got a strong PC. I do think that the level design is a little bit less impressive than its predecessor, because there are times when I feel as if they're reusing the same level layout way too much. Now, granted, you still have a lot of the same stuff, like bell towers and radio towers and outposts. My biggest complaint is in the attacks on the fortresses. I expected these to be unique and challenging battles, and they feel like extended outpost missions. Not really something I was impressed with. Not bad, but it's the only minor gripe I have in the visuals, is that the certain areas and levels just feel too simplistic. Either way, the best thing about this game in terms of its effects and visuals is its explosion and fire effects, which you've been seeing bits and pieces of throughout this video. But where the game has its real strength is the fact that it does, with, the technology available, well, let's be honest, Michael Bay would probably have a complete and utter, drool fest over this game. It has, beautiful explosions and tons of great visuals. It's not without certain limitations, but on the newer systems, it's beautiful. It also has some impressive, well, how would you describe it? The fact that there's no load time in a lot of the game's environments is very impressive. I've gone from one side of the map to the other, and it was smooth and fluid without failure. So, well worth the time and effort. I give credit where it's due. The designers did excellent work with the technology. I do hope, however, that if they do another Far Cry, they choose a more varied terrain. Granted, the third game, it was all islands and there was very little in the way of variety. I mean, you were either in the jungle, you were in the water, you were on the beach, or you were in caves. At least with this, they've added the snow-covered Himalayas, and they've added the, what do you call it? They've added the temples and other monasteries and such, which gives it a bit more variety. Yet I still feel at the end that next time you might want to go to a place that has a greater amount of variety to it. Still, it looks beautiful, and there's no denying that it's probably one of the best looking games out right at the moment. So, technically, I'd give it high marks. I'm particularly proud of its weapon and visual effects for explosions and fire, but, I'm sure there's going to be some people who argue about it, and, everybody has their opinion. So, yeah, it is what it is. That being said, let's move on to the next category, and the last category. I'm going to be doing a quick little run on this. Now, what we're dealing with in this case is my conclusions. And as I put it, it's a trip worth taking. There's few games that can give you the feeling of being a real powerhouse, a real warrior. In the third game, it was all about going from being a warrior to being a soldier. Well, it was from going to being a punk and a street kid with rich parents to being a warrior and making decisions along the way. In this game, it's more about a person trying to decide what side of the debate he would stand on, tradition or progress, and whether he's going to follow one path through victory or another. At the end of the day, I say this game is worth playing, and definitely for people with the new consoles, worth getting on a general roll. If you're a fan of Far Cry 3, there's no argument. Get this game. It's another wonderful rush and a great game to play. On the other hand, if you haven't played Far Cry before, you don't need to play 3 to get into this. You'll have a blast of a time with Far Cry 3, with Far Cry 4, and it may even encourage you to go back and check out 3. At the end of the day, these are the games that, prove that there can be real fun and enjoyment in the AAA industry. And I think that part of the problem we have with the industry as a whole is we don't give players enough credit. I think that this game gives you the tools and then says, alright, go crazy, have fun. And it succeeds brilliantly. I've done things that include leaping from a flying helicopter to diving through the ravines and crevices of the Himalayas to fighting off a snow leopard with a bow and arrow. The game gives you all the options in the world, all the variety you can ask for, and then says, alright, what do you do now? So, yeah, there's always going to be some questions as to whether or not the game is worth playing. And in this case, I think that anyone who wants a big, solid, stable adventure should check it out. Granted, there are some hiccups. No game is without its, downside, as it were. But at the end of the day, you'll be having more fun than you will be having frustration. And in fact, I think that one of the things that drove me crazy about this game is that every time I had something go wrong, every time I thought I was out of luck, or every time I thought I was gonna, rage quit the game, something happened that immediately drew me right back in. One particular case was I lost a battle in a outpost, so I had to start the outpost over again. So the next time I went in, I figured, okay, I gotta try a different strategy. Not 10 seconds after I get near the base, a tiger roars in and starts murdering the entire base. And it's like, okay, I'll let him do my work. And off you go. Now with new features like a bait mechanic to lure animals in, and new weapons that give you a wider variety of options, the game gives you tons of ways to approach any problem. And you'll find yourself having a lot of fun just coming up with new tactics. End of the day, it's up to you if you want to buy it, but I would recommend it. Again, this is MatCat, and Far Cry 4 gets my recommendation of buy it, especially if you have the new consoles, or if you have a super good PC. I think that's about it, folks. So, give Far Cry 4 a try. I'll be back with a review of maybe Super Smash Bros. Shortly. We'll see. This is MatCat signing off.